All right, we are back, my friends. Thanks for joining us for the second half. Another great informative half we've got ahead of you. This next session is all about customer relationships and controls. Can they really work together? And today we have on the panel Ravi Mathavan, independent practitioner who is a FinOps and transformation leader. He's accomplished and engaging director of global business services with extensive tenures of leading finance, shared services operations, and transformations. Proven sector experience in large international market research, creative media, advertising, and information services industries. It goes on and on and on. Ravi, how are you today, my friend?
Really well, Rob. It's a hard gig to play to, given the billing you've given it.
Well, I only got through maybe 10% of your resume. Tell us a little more about yourself real quick.
Yeah, very quickly. So I'd say 25 years plus in shared services, actually leading shared services, design, operation, build, scale. And also part and parcel of shared services is the transformation of finance functions, because you're going from a current operating model to a target. And that's always an ongoing thing. Even, to this very day, we're all engaged in transformation activities, one form or the other. And this little, combination I've got here is really around the emotional elements, the human elements. Despite AI and the advent of it, I think that we can never get away from. So I hopefully leave some nuggets of thoughts with people. Hopefully that's enough, Rob.
I love it. Leaving nuggets is always exciting for sure. So I'm going to pass things over to you, Ravi, but for our attendees, I encourage you to throw the questions in the chat room. I'm going to grab those questions, and at the end, when Ravi is finished his session, we'll field those questions. So again, this is all about customer relationships and controls. Can they really work together? Ravi, can they?
Well, I think they can, and they have to. So let me just sort of share my screen and run to the presentation. Bear with me. Let me just get to the screen here. If you let me just share. Okay, I think you can see what I'm seeing, which is my.
I can, so I imagine they can as well.
Okay, fine. That's looking good. Okay, I've got some thumbs up going up. Okay, so really, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me as a panelist, because I think there's a lot to be said about, this particular group as well, operational finance leaders and practitioners. You're familiar, no doubt, with the concept and the reality of finance operating models or target operating models. We have a current operating model. Whatever you're doing now, it's your current operating model. You might have an aspiration to move to a finance target, which is a new ERP, a new service delivery design. You name it. But then that's moving from the model as you have it now to an end stage. What you can't get away from are two elements in that operating model, and in particular, process and controls, okay, and then also service delivery. So, this is universal, in terms of operating model elements. So you've got process and controls, you've got service delivery. And really, putting those in is one thing, but then actually, delivering, great service, and at the same time, safeguarding your organization and your customers, from risk. I think that really requires, at every level, whether you're a senior or whether you're a newbie who's just joined the organization, I think there's a lot of, learning and development and collaborative work that, we can all do. And I speak from the experience of having worked at Taylor Nelson Software's TNS, which actually is now part of the Kantar group, and Kantar were previously part of WPP, so that's where the media background comes from. And certainly, in shared services, I've had to collaborate with our internal assurance people, internal audit, and also with our learning and development people. So what I want to take you through are, a couple of ways in which internal control can be taught, can be sort of embraced, can be sort of, sort of embedded as part of your culture. And then the other part of the talk is really around managing the customer relationship, because if you've got really good processes and controls that you understand or you're able to articulate, that forms the foundation of engaging with your customers, either internal or external, because that is objective. It's based on things that get done, need to get done, and it forms a strong foundation of some really great conversations as to how service is impacted and how you wish to deliver great service. So those are the sort of things I want to sort of draw out from here. Some of the slides.
Ravi, I'm just going to jump in here. Sorry to jump in. Can you share your screen in presentation mode?
Sure, will do. I'm just moving it to it now. So if you can see that now, does that work? Do I need to now minimize my?
Yep.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let me just sort of start from the top then. Let's look at controls first of all. When I was actually working at TNS as it was then, so I did say I've got a bit of a heritage in terms of the number of years. So I've actually pulled this from real work that we did. Okay, so I was running a shared service center, and really there's an imperative to educate people coming into the shared service center, new employees, and also educate people who are veterans in terms of, when it comes to, that element of the, operating model, process and controls, why are we doing what we're doing, and how can we actually sort of, if you like, conduct ourselves in a way which, informs, the conversation, right? So with controls, I developed, and this is something that I developed, something, it's a mnemonic, it's kind of fun, it's it's ORIC. Okay, so it's really around when you're running a process, or what is the point, okay, and what can go wrong, okay, and I've given a little sort of little example here. What's the impact, and what's the mitigation? What can you put in place to actually ensure that the impact doesn't manifest as a result of your risk being exposed and your objective being defeated. So we, in our shared service center, worked with our internal control team, our internal auditors, to actually augment and build a culture around everything we do. What's the ORIC? What is the objective? What's the risk? What's the impact? What's the control? If you take something away from this part of the presentation, I would really urge the sort of the ORIC mindset, and that really is exactly that. It's it's a thought approach in terms of organizational risk and internal control, and it actually can be quite fun, because what happens is that people start questioning, why am I doing what I'm doing? If I don't do this, what can go wrong? What's the impact to my organization, to my team, to my my sort of process area, my function? And really, what is it that we're doing to mitigate? So if that control step is omitted, then I better make sure it's not, because this is the impact. So really, it was getting everyone at every level, from senior leadership through to people who just joined, new to the operation, to actually sort of get into this mindset of ORIC. And as I said, we worked with our internal control partners or audit assurance partners, because end of the day, there is a formal element to this, but then you can put the fun on top, because it is actually about the internal control process. And what ORIC does is turn thoughts into action. So really, you've got this sort of classic pyramid of, the control environment, risk assessment, control activities, and monitoring. And really, what we were doing at shared service of have the right attitude, okay? As it is that you're doing what you're doing. And then in terms of risk assessment, this is the part around identifying, what could go wrong as a result of undertaking a particular process, or you're trying to actually achieve something. What could go wrong if it's left unmitigated? And this is where the control bit comes in, the control activities. What steps are you actually following as part of your process, which in effect is the nub of the control, the actual, the activity of mitigation. And then really around the monitoring, this is where internal audit are really great, because they will recognize a pyramid like this. And then the fact that your team and the culture you're building is actually addressing these things in terms of testing them. This is where the self-audit comes in. Your own teams can actually have a timetable of self-testing so that you're ahead of the game and you actually understand how up to date your control environment is, and work with internal audit to achieve that. And so for me, it is about, the control consciousness of our people, making, getting people to actually sort of understand why they do what they do. And then also in terms of, the protection of shareholders, teams and other stakeholders, have a really robust framework which actually does, go about identifying, assessing and managing. And this is where working with internal audit, whether you've got your own in-house assurance teams, or you have an outsourced provider who comes in, this really actually does sort of build those incredible collaborations. And at the end of the day, operating controls and ensuring appropriate control environment is the responsibility ultimately of everyone, but also of heads of departments and cycle owners. Okay, so everybody becomes a co-stakeholder in the operation of controls. But the ORIC mnemonic, in terms of actually, imparting that sort of mindset, I think is quite powerful and is well accepted and well received, at my time in TNS. And again, you can still attach, elements of formality to this in terms of, when you do identify risk and you do an assessment, you would have seen classic impact and likelihood grids like this. It's up to you to actually understand your own environment and then to actually sort of use something like this to grade the sort of the level of risk that your organization and your processes and environment are actually sort of exposed to. Okay, so there are, I'm sure these, I can share, I'd let you have these slides, but really just say that, there are some, some frameworks you can then augment, in your approach to the internal control risk process. Control activities. Always remember, what am I doing to remove or eliminate risk? And this is where things like policies, procedures, and actions, you can actually look at those in this sort of in the context of ORIC to actually ensure that, is it relevant what you're doing? I mean, are some of those steps, do they mitigate, or are they bureaucratic, or actually are they quite smart in terms of what they're seeking to do? So again, this is for me not to prevaricate what your organizations have by way of risk exposure, but just giving some pointers in terms of when you do get your teams together with your internal audit people and you go through an ORIC way of looking at your internal control environment. This is the sort of thinking that will certainly sort of make it very interactive. Okay. Now the monitoring, you can see the ORIC mnemonic actually spells out objective, risk, impact, control. And what we did at TNS was actually we juxtaposed it. We put it up against what were established controls that were going to be tested, and we got our teams to actually look to what it is that they were doing, which was actually aligned to the requirements of a particular control when it was being formally tested. In this case, we were a SOX listed entity at that time, and so we actually referenced it to our SOX controls when setting out, for example, AP, AR, R2R, what it is that we would be sort of getting our teams to actually sort of narrate, test, and self-test for themselves. Okay. This is just basically another example of where this is a real example of where with WPP there was a particular control description, but then being ahead of the game, the AP team actually put the control, the ORIC thinking into place, and were able to actually have a positive engagement with our auditors in terms of you're testing for this, but what we've got in place and what we're doing and how we test it over over sort of periodic points are documented in this way. So we actually worked in collaboration with our auditors to ensure that we were demonstrating our mindset, and we're also addressing the testing that the independent testers would also be doing as well. Okay, so it's proactively augmenting internal audit. And that sort of sits nicely in the sort of the monitoring part, if you like, of what internal auditors or assurance people would be looking at from a shared service center or process hub that would be delivering services. This is all I'm saying here is you will find things going wrong, so set up issue logs, because it's all very well doing self-audits, but then there should be a process which identifies remediation action, and once you put in a remediation action, the actual documentation of that, because that will now form part of your process, and that should be again documented, signed off, approved. But certainly these self-testing monitoring activities should have some outputs in terms of they either were successful, or there's an action plan to remediate because there was some you discovered some failings in your self-audit testing. So this is part of the monitoring. Now, went through quite a lot there, and I can't see whether any questions came up on that part, but please let me know. So I can't see while screen
no
sharing.
questions just yet, Ravi.
Okay,
no questions just yet. But again, our attendees, I encourage you to throw me some questions so I can pass them over to Ravi.
Okay. As I said, when I started the presentation, I said, we're looking at, building, you're looking at your operating model, you're looking at processes and controls, and then another important part of your operating model is service delivery. And, again, from my experience when I was at Kantar, the shared service center was really around sort of, improving ourselves, not just our processes, but also the culture of managing customer expectations. And one of the key foundations of managing a customer relationship in service centers is for you to know your processes and your controls. So you can see the segue from, first of all, understand why you're doing what you're doing to actually mitigate risk and deliver to the objective of a process. Okay, but then once you've built that knowledge, and this is where it took over a duration, that knowledge then sort of served as the basis with which great service can be built and trust can be built, because you're able to explain to your internal customers or your external customers, if you were collections teams, or you're in payments, or even doing your reporting and you had group finance, which were internal customers of yours, you're able to set expectations around why your processes and your controls were delivering to what they required, but at the same time we in a shared service environment needed to fulfill the right steps, and therefore the timelines, the cycle times, and therefore the consistency with which they can expect to see service and experience service. So with this, we worked in developing this customer relationship and building customer relationship culture. We worked with our learning and development and HR people. So the first bit, I said, please do pair up with your internal audit and assurance teams to actually sort of get the benefit of the collaboration there. With building customer relationships, there's some great work that learning and development and HR teams can certainly help you with, because what I'm going to run through is basically some pointers. But the main thing is understanding the dynamics and the levers of managing the customer relationship in service organizations. So again, from the experience of having had a one-day team learning and development workshop, I'll just run through this just to sort of, there were five objectives that we really wanted to achieve by working with our learning and development team and our shared service operational team. And this is to apply, as I said, to apply process knowledge, okay, to communicate service expectations, and that gives you confidence. And then really, this is where it gets fun. We identified types of stakeholders in our own organization. You'll have your own types of stakeholders. So that is really so that we get personas in our organizations, the types of people that we meet, and how it is, what strategies can we develop to be able to actually deliver to their expectations. And then certainly building rapport, importance of rapport to build trust, and then managing service expectations on the journey and to resolve conflict. So this, again, if you take anything away from the slides, the first half I said, the auric, mnemonic, certainly, and then the internal control environment triangle. This is another pyramid I'm giving you. Certainly, look to how process capability links to service offering, customer engagement, service delivery, and then really this is where the people bit comes in. How to sort of resolve conflict, build rapport, build trust, and to communicate, in a way that keeps that cycle going. I'll just that's it. I'll just move on. So again, these are snippets from the workshop that we did. So this is all real and live. You can have your own definitions, but I've only put one up because this is how we structured it. We've got people to talk about stakeholders. What is a stakeholder? Who is a customer? And so you can get sort of definitions that are out there, but then they hinge more or less onto the same type of attributes, and it is one for you to develop yourself. So I won't read it out. All I'm saying is understand who your stakeholders are, and definition of something that people can hang on to in your own operational teams, okay? And then really, this is quite key. Managing communication, customer expectations, and building trust. There are some prerequisites I hasten and urge you to have in place. These are things like service catalogs, a service charter, service levels, standard operating procedures and controls, because this is the collateral that your transactional expert teams will, they need to understand because they're operating them. It's back to my earlier part of the presentation, auric, in terms of understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're operating things, because this gives you the actual currency with which you're able to engage your customers. Otherwise, it's random. These are the sort of the tenets on which you're able to engage, okay, and establish agreement, okay, and the way the style and the way you engage your stakeholders will depend on the stakeholder type again, and that's part of the workshop that we did in Kantar as well. But fundamentally, and just sort of setting out effectively a formula almost in terms of if the agreement you establish with your internal customer, you will turn this purchase order around, or you will bill at this particular point a particular type of customer, and then you've got timescales and turnarounds, and really keeping people informed. So these steps, again, with your learning and development people, build out a sort of a procedural, strategic way with which you're able to actually, build, that trust cycle and that trust relationship. Okay. Now, again, we've all seen this stakeholder mapping, but really, end of the day, it's fun when you're able to actually sort of look at your own organization and you're able to actually map against, the stakeholder level of interest and power. And again, these definitions of customer types, I mean, Edgar Schein did some work here, but your learning and development or HR people, or even if you buy in some teaching resource, I mean, you can work with your own teams to actually identify the types of customers. There are different types of customers that you will come across, and therefore you can develop various strategies, consistent strategies for your teams to actually work and manage the expectations of the different types of customers. I mean, given my half-an-hour slot, I can't go into a whole day workshop, but you can see, sort of the direction of travel, okay? And again, back to the sort of the cycle of building trust and, based on rapport, communication, and the resolution of conflict. In our workshop, again, we had a definition of what is rapport. Again, you can tailor it to, what your organization and how you wish to sort of, define it. But certainly it is important for service delivery. And this is a real takeaway, right? We're in the world of AI now. We're in the age of digital. So why is it important? Because, and this is from a Japanese scholastic team, Despite the expansion of digital transformation, interpersonal interactions remain the foundation for successful business-to-business outcomes, right? You can't take away the human element of modern business, and in particular in process areas, AR continues to have a big touch point with the end customer and with people, whereas you find that P2P processes are highly automated. But certainly, even when processes go wrong, I think that human interaction certainly is where the value of the human in the process still bears true. Okay. And then finally, just dealing with difficult people. At Kantar, there are difficult people, but then our approach and working with learning and development was that we spun it on its head. And so people are different. It is their behaviors that might become difficult. And it's really looking at, being trained, to change our engagement behavior and therefore to change our attitude. It's not like you've got, for example, there's a fairly well documented segmentation of difficult people by Robert Bramson, right? It's actually, his seminal book is called Coping with Difficult People. But as I said, we turned it on its head. But then again, you can use this as a talking point with your learning and development team, with your HR, when you run a workshop like this, to actually tease out, with your teams, these type of traits they're coming across. But then the key thing is, what's going to be, our behavior and therefore our attitude, and how are we going to deal with this professionally? Okay, so as I said, half an hour isn't the same as a one-day workshop, but I just wanted to give you some signposts as to, that cycle I showed you insofar as, managing conflict, building trust, and rapport, and so forth. And again, very quickly, behaviors to manage conflict. We always look for collaboration and compromise. And I think this really, for me, in conflict resolution, I would suggest that especially in order to cash and in delinquency and chasing aged debt, I think there's a lot to be said where those teams certainly, can, benefit from, some of the, if you like, the strategies or, hallmarks of what are success factors in conflict resolution. Okay, so again, what I'm saying is there is a logic to this, and I would certainly urge O2C teams and delinquency and chasing of debt, or even billing as something for where contention can come up for focus, particularly in conflict resolution. Okay. And just to let you know, the way we did it at Kantar was it was a half-day syndicate workshop, and then the format was basically by process domain. We had groups, P2P, R2R, O2C, and the technical help desk team as well. And then we just looked at service delivery case examples, real examples, and people discussed who was the customer, how were their service expectations managed, were there any difficult behaviors or trust issues, and then what was the service outcome. And this was really part of an ongoing service excellence awards, and building out a service delivery culture. And for us, it was fun. People learnt, and I think really, in doing what they were doing, they were also safeguarding, the control environment, because, as I said, the foundation of discussions really centered around understanding your processes and controls to be able to articulate why you're doing, something the way you're doing it, and therefore, I think, have an objective, sort of foundation with which to then sort of, have a really engaging customer experience. I think I'll pause there. I think I'm come on to time as well. I just leave you as a summary, and thank you for your patience and thank you for listening. I'll just sum this up. So the finance target operating model, or finance operating model, it has in its elements, which we are all familiar with, two of these I've just talked about: processing controls and service delivery. And this brings it together in that by investing in capability and training, working with internal audit or assurance on the control side, working with learning and development on the managing the customer relationship side, what we did and what you can do too, and I'm sure you're probably on a road of this, on this path anyway, is to build a culture of service excellence. The key thing is though to partner with internal audit and to partner with learning and development. This, it certainly does give it, an enterprise feel to, this area of improvement in your operating model. I hope
Ravi,
that's enough.
I do have one question for you, sir, before you leave, because we are out of time, but I want to get to this question from an attendee.
Yeah.
How was the L&D workshop received by the teams, and what did the team take away from it? If you can condense that answer to a quick one, please.
Yeah, so the learning and development team were an in-house team, and I think we made it into a fun half-day workshop. The team loved it because it's part of their continual professional development. It's also ways in which that they could cope in their day-to-day life because they felt, they were sharing problems, solving together, and had strategies which they could actually use to actually enjoy coming in and actually the challenge of customer relationship management. So I think it was well received. And the takeaway was effectively, where people then came back and in their sort of process monthly groups were able to talk about the experiences of that month or a difficult experience and share again. So we kept sharing and learning from the experiences.
Ravi, thank you so much. Lots of information to take there. Thank goodness we've got this videotape so people can, take a look at this very informative session. Thank you for being one of our keynote speakers. This was amazing. And Ravi, after every session, I've been kind of doing dad jokes because that's what I do on my radio show. And one of our panelists said, "Oh, that's a good dad joke." But here's the question to you. When does a dad joke become a dad joke?
Well, when you become a dad?
No, when it becomes apparent. So you were right there, my friend. Thank you again, Ravi.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your gathering and your conference. And thank you so much for inviting me here today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.